And I see some of you are saying hello. I don't know how to respond without responding to the whole group, but I do recognize quite a few names and alumni from our program, and it's always good to see you. Even just your names, it's good to see you folks. So thanks for joining us today. I do want to start with three quick things. One is we are recording the session, so please be aware of that. Two is that this is part 2 of a series. I don't think you needed to see part 1 to get value out of part 2, but know that part 1 is on our website if you want to go ahead and view that. And then the third thing I want to say is that this is for experienced business architects. So it's not architecture 101. So if you have no experience with business architecture, you're welcome to stay, but just know that you are not our key demographic. And I guess you can let me know if you're hearing, I guess, the barrage of garbage trucks that now need to drive through my neighborhood that I've started the webinar. So let me know if that's distracting. I'm Beth Schaefer. I'm the director of the Institute for Professional Development at Metropolitan State University. When it comes to business architecture, we do two things. One is we have customized training. So if your team is looking for training in business architects specific to what your needs are, we can do that. And then we have a continuing education component open to anyone in the public, and that business architecture certificate program will launch late fall with an all virtual option, so you don't have to drive to our campus. So we're excited about that, and more information on that will be forthcoming. Today, as we move through, if you have questions, please throw them into the chat. I set up the webinar I checked the Q&A box, but since it's a small group and I know most of you, I'll just be honest, I'm not sure I know how to use the Q&A function. So just put your questions in the chat and I will see them. Maureen said she'd prefer to hold questions to the end, but right now with the size group that we have, I feel like we could take them as we go. So throw them into the chat and I'll kind of manage that as we go along. Maureen is joining us. She is, again, you maybe saw her in part 1. She's a practicing business architect for Blue Cross Blue Shield. She does have her certified business architect certificate from the Business Architecture Guild. She's also an alumni of the Metropolitan State Business Architect Certificate Program. Oh, excuse me. And in addition to presenting for us, she also presents at Guild Summits. She's just such a wonderful speaker and a wealth of knowledge to share. So I'm glad that she is back with us again. As I mentioned, this is part 2 of a 3-part series where she is sharing her experience on setting up a business architecture practice at an enterprise level. And today is on charter. And with that, Maureen, I think that's the end of my spiel, and I will be quiet and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Beth. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, let's get right into it. We have about 45 minutes of presentation, I think, maybe less. But this is part 2 of standing up a business architecture practice. And we'll be talking about the business architecture charter in this, well, at least the charter that our team stood up or created to relaunch our practice, and we'll get into some of the details. So a practice charter is not anything other than what a charter typically is, if you're familiar with the artifact that sometimes comes out of projects. You can Google team charters, and there's standards or templates out there on the interweb that you can use. Excuse me. But because every company is different, and each company may utilize the business architecture practice differently. I'm not prescribing that what we did would work for you, but it is an option. It also may be a baseline to start with. But I'll give you some anecdotes along the way to demonstrate why we chose the path we did and what works for us and what doesn't work for us. Our practice charter, even though this is not an exhaustive list, it does contain these different sections, our purpose, our value proposition, what products and services we offer, our mission, our vision, our goals, our engagement model with internal and external stakeholders, our practice governance, an overview of that, and then our maturity and any metrics that we provide. So what it did for us, what a practice charter did for us was we have a long history of business architecture in fits and starts. And when we finally relaunched back in 2018, after almost 10 years of trying to start, and we stopped and started and stopped, we had to really focus our attention on exactly what our practice needed to be in order to be successful this time. And what it did was it illuminated areas where we needed better definition of what our team was about and what value we offered to the organization. We did work through what our mission was, what our vision, what our goals were, short and long term, and ensuring that it really kind of put everybody on the same page, through the discussions about what the business architecture practice would be with the relaunch. The person that we reported to, his view of what our practice should be, we had to make sure that and I say we, but I was a team of one at that time. I had to make sure that we were all aligned on exactly what he expected our team to do for the company and for the organization and for his department, his division. So it was a good discussion. It was, we really got off to a good start, and it started with the charter, developing the charter, because when I first sat down to do the charter, it was almost like we had never thought about it in these terms before. We hadn't thought about it in terms of what is our mission, what is our vision, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve by having a business architecture practice in the company. And like I said, it's not a requirement to stand up a practice, but if you're unclear about what your practice purpose is, what your story is, even if you just do it just for your team, it can help uncover some of the things that you hadn't thought about. And it also, like I said, brings to light any disconnects between yourselves, if you're a multi-person team, and disconnects between yourself and your management. So at the end of this, hopefully you'll be able to understand how a charter for your practice could bring value and understand the different parts that we've used and we would recommend. And it really is dependent upon your how you've instituted business architecture in your organization. So let's start with the question, who in the charter, who are we and what is our purpose? So like I said, these aren't new concepts. Templates abound out on the internet. But the way I had to think about it was, why is the reader, so who's my audience, and why is the reader reading the charter? And the purpose was to, in my mind anyway, what was our team to the organization? So we open with, one, a lot of folks internally don't know what business architecture is. So we open with what business architecture is, simply a definition of what business architecture is in the industry, what it is in the organization, and what we strive to do. So the purpose of the Business Architecture Practice Charter is to provide an overview of the vision, the mission, and the goals of the business architecture team in the practice. That's the purpose of the charter. The purpose of our team obviously is different, but we describe the activities we perform in the organization, what products and services we render, and the expected engagement between business architects and other teams, departments, internal and external stakeholders. So like I said, it describes your practice. It includes your value proposition. If you attended webinar part 1, we did the value proposition. So that poured it right over into this discussion. Like I said, practice mission, vision, goals, short and long term. And then also, how are you going to achieve those goals? What actions or steps is the practice taking? And what's the status of those actionable goals? And just as an aside, one of the things when I came back into the practice and was a team of 1, the former manager of the practice had left for a different role. And again, we had to relaunch it because it really, you could say the practice wasn't very successful, or it hadn't really gotten its footing yet. But with the relaunch, the vision and the set of goals we had and the support we had from our leadership, and the support was even bolstered by the fact that we gave it so much thought, and we wanted to make sure that we had a clear set of objectives this time. It took a few iterations of the charter, but we finally got on the same page, and the relaunch was successful this time. So we've been operating under the charter, the guidelines of the charter now for almost 4 years. So like I said, describing what business architecture is. Don't assume that anyone that comes and read your charter that they know what business architecture is. So at our company, we begin with number 1, what is a business architecture? Basically, a fully articulated business architecture is, and we describe what reference models are, what cross-mapping is, the nuts and bolts, and the tools leveraged by our team. Number 2, we describe what we see our practice as to our organization. That in itself is the most important thing for most people that come to read our charter. And then number 3, we describe what the value of business architecture is from an industry perspective, and we reference the BizBox. But again, I want to reiterate, business architecture is not implemented in every company the same. So one of the things that I think is valuable as far as a charter is concerned is that if you have open positions, a candidate may want to understand exactly how you've implemented business architecture at your organization. Because certain teams or certain practices in certain organizations, I'm not sure I would want to join a decentralized team. For instance, our team is an enterprise-wide business architecture group, and it's a centralized group. So we're the only business architects in our organization. Whereas I have a colleague who is in an organization where there's business architects all over the place, and there's nothing centralized. There's nothing common necessarily about each practice within the company and the different departments. So giving a candidate your charter as much as you can, I don't think there's anything proprietary in ours. That to me is a great review or an overview of what that candidate could expect coming into your organization. And even if you don't share it then, sharing it during your onboarding process. We just hired someone, and it was great to be able to provide the new associate with the charter to give an overview of what we do on a day-to-day basis. So again, the next section in our charter is our value proposition. So this is developed in actually the Metropolitan Certificate Program. We just added or revised our value proposition. Our original value proposition was very industry level language, but we worked through our value proposition during the Metro Certificate Program, and we were able to revise that to very specific value propositions per stakeholder and talk about what each product and service that we provide within the organization, what value it brings to those different stakeholders. So I'm not going to go over the value proposition at any length. This is the entire topic of part 1. But again, using the value mapping that we did in the Metro Certificate Program, we were able to revise this year, actually, to be more specific. So then the practice mission and the practice vision, it's really simple. It sounds simple, but you know, what's the ultimate purpose of establishing a business architecture practice? Why centralize it versus decentralize it? Or why not have a practice at all? I know another organization who doesn't have a practice, doesn't have a group of people. They just have that role of business architect, and they don't even call them business architects, but their role really is that discipline. But they don't find it necessary to develop a practice or have a group of people solely dedicated to business architecture. So what's the mission? What's your vision? If you are standing up a practice, or you're just perhaps just standing up business architects in your department, what's the vision for, what's the ultimate purpose for doing that? And then where do you see that role or that practice now and in the future? So in our world, a high-level summary of our team's mission is to ensure all areas of the organization are considered when strategic and tactical initiatives are planned and or undertaken. So that was the reason back in 2009 that our team was formed, loosely business architecture, more solution architecture at that time. But that was the reason that one of the leaders in the company looked at us as, you know, the team that would hopefully prevent some of the disconnects between our internal stakeholders and the IT department. You know, either the build was too much or the build was too little, and it didn't meet the internal customer or stakeholders' needs. So they wanted to bridge the gap between IT and the business. That was the original purpose. So we stuck to that. We didn't expand on it too much, but we did formalize it in the charter. That was what our mission was. Our vision originally was, in our first iteration of our charter, was to establish a practice. And it has evolved in the different iterations of the charter. We're on version 7 now. We started, like I said, almost 4 years ago. So we've had 7 revisions in almost 4 years. So this keeps us focused on what we see our practice evolving into, short-term and long-term, whereas before, we really didn't have any direction. We didn't really have an articulated vision of what the practice could be or would be. it also made us focus on our value to the company. So our goals, short and long term. Short term is what are the practice goals? How do you propose to achieve those goals and when? So we have a section in our charter under goals that's short term, and we have target dates in the charter and what exactly we expect to be able to do. If the goal has been met, we have a check mark, or we have a graphic that basically says we've completed that goal or we've achieved that goal. Long-term goals, those are things that in my view are maybe 2 years out or more. And then how do we expect to achieve those long-term goals as well, and what we're targeting as a completion. And we had to revisit and refresh that over and over the last almost 4 years. And we put graphics in our charter to indicate where we are, whether it's been revised or not for this current iteration, version 7, or maybe if it's new. So one of our long-term goals is to fully articulate the business architecture of the company into the tool that we utilize. That is a long-term goal. It's a very tedious activity. The business architects that are also on the team are rather new to the practice. So just ramping up and understanding how to create reference models takes a bit, especially with our other part of our day job, which is solutioning projects. But if you don't have any goals, then how do you know where you're going? So the next thing in our charter is we describe our products and services. Excuse me. So from the webinar, part 1 again, we align our products and services to our customers' profile, their needs, their jobs, their pains and gains. So pain relievers should address a pain in the customer's profile. A gain creator would add value to the customer in relation to their profile. Again, we covered this in part 1, but basically this is the artifacts that we produce on a regular basis. It's the reference models, and then the services. We have a service we call discovery. So if a business team has an idea about something they want to do and spend corporate dollars doing it, we will do discovery with them and other stakeholders to ensure that everyone understands the full scope and impacts that that idea will have on each organization within the company. And then make sure that there's nothing hidden or operationally hidden or technically hidden that perhaps the owner of that idea didn't think of. So that has really shown to be one of our best services that business teams are clamoring for. So in this iteration of our practice, we have more requests for discovery and assistance than we can handle at this point. And our team in the past 4 years, as I said, in 2017, 2018, I was a team of 1. By the end of 2018, we were a team of 3. And now in 2021, we're a team of 4. So we have, and we could use another person as well, a more experienced person. The last person we hired is a junior, so they're learning. But we have enough requests where, especially for discovery, that we just can't handle the number of requests that we get for our services. And then the products and services are taken right from the value mapping exercise in the business model canvas. So I put an example of our business model canvas here just to show you that this is the key activities, and hopefully you can see that. I know it's kind of small. The key activities, this is basically where we pull our products and services from. So it's a very handy tool to do value mapping and then the business model canvas for your practice itself. And just as an aside, this is exactly where we get our value proposition statements from as well for our charter. So one of the things that we did not have in place, and this is a struggle, admittedly, the business architecture practice and how to measure success. So we really had no concrete measures outside of what is our discovery and our artifacts that we produce during a project life cycle, or before a project life cycle starts, or before an agile team takes over and starts their scrums and all the different iterations of development. We had to look at what is it that would show that we were succeeding in our mission, which was, and our goals, which was to make sure that the impact and the full scope of projects and initiatives were understood before we started. So one of the first metrics that we used was the number of, or the rate of change requests on projects that we actually did the work on, did the upfront work on, and compared it to those projects of similar size and scale, the numbers of CRs or change controls that were entered for those projects, and it was significantly different. So that was one of the metrics that our leadership touts to this day, because in his estimation and the different ways that they've looked at the numbers, our involvement has saved the company millions of dollars, because we no longer have as many, I'm not saying we don't have any, but we don't have as many projects that are started and have to restart because the initiative or the ask from the business wasn't fully understood. We don't have as many missed scope or missed requirement items because we fully discover from all stakeholders that we uncover. We fully articulate in our documentation our artifacts or products that we produce. We fully describe exactly what that impact is expected to be. Even if the project team takes over and has that as a baseline and then it changes, that's better than not knowing at all. So this number of CRs has declined significantly where we're involved in projects up front. So the other ways to measure your success is to check on your practice maturity. We have a section in our charter for practice maturity, and we review it whenever we revise our charter to see where we are. And I think I have a slide to that effect in another couple slides. Again, you could measure your success, and one of the things that we haven't started, but we have talked about doing customer surveys. So we have a process now where the business stakeholders can request our services through the project management office, which is the standard way of starting a project or requesting a project and corporate funding. But we also, I don't know if you're familiar with ServiceNow, but it's basically the corporate system where requests are made, technical issues are reported, and people get services all over the organization. So we created a form in ServiceNow, and anyone can go in and request our services. So one of the things we want to start is to, once we close one of those service requests, is to trigger a customer survey to try to measure the experience that the internal customer had with our team. Again, we haven't started that. We do have the go-ahead to develop the survey with one of our tools groups. But hopefully we'll get positive feedback, but not all feedback needs to be positive to be valuable. Positive feedback lets you know you're on the right track, that you're on the right track to achieve your goals and you're delivering the value that you intended. My view of mediocre feedback is that you might be on the right track, but maybe you need to tweak some things. Maybe there's an adjustment that needs to be made in order to ensure that you're going to meet your goal. Negative feedback isn't, to me, is an opportunity. You may need to step back and reassess where you are or what your value proposition is. Go back to your business model canvas and check to make sure that you didn't inadvertently map things in an inappropriate or incorrect way. Or maybe your business has changed. One of the things that has happened with us lately is one of our artifacts, when we go through discovery, depending on the project and how large and complex it can be, or how many stakeholders there are, it can be extremely long and voluminous. And I knew it wasn't going to be received well, even though it was valuable to a project team. Certain leaders, department heads, they don't want to, go through 30, 40, 50, 60 pages of information. So we struggled with reducing the size of our assessment. And one of the things that has recently happened, we have federal mandates that we have to comply with over the next few years in the healthcare industry. And it's a huge, 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 huge project. And one of the senior VPs, we met with her about something in particular. And, she made a really off-the-cuff comment about, now that I've gotten through all those 80 to 90 pages of assessment and information. So even though it was of value to her, she really didn't appreciate having to go through all of that material. That was more needed for the project team that was going to be executing. So what we've done, especially with this project, is we've even though we had an executive summary already in our artifact, we created a one-page template of and summarized what a business leader would want to really read about. And that really went over very well. So we had to step back and reassess. And her feedback was negative in a way, but it was positive that it was good information, but it was negative in that she doesn't have time to read all of that. But excuse me, but had we not gotten that feedback, we would not have known that it really was that burdensome, and that our executive summary that we did have in the deck actually wasn't enough. Some of the feedback that we've gotten too is there was role confusion. So when we relaunched, we had a period of time where business teams didn't understand, even the project team didn't understand where our role stopped and where the PM and the BSA, the business systems analyst, started. Because we drive the project before it really starts, but the PM is already engaged, and so that they know what's going on, and the ramp up isn't as long or as difficult or steep. So we created a 90-minute business architecture engagement education program where before the pandemic, we used to do quarterly sessions with any new project managers, any new PMO staff, any new technical teams, any new vendors. We have a platform vendor, so any new architects or solution people from the vendor would take our class. And that seemed to resolve some of the confusion about what our role was and what our engagement model was. So that's another part of our charter, is we describe our engagement model with all of the different people that we interact with. But again, that charter is not something that people reach to immediately when they deal with our team. It's there for them if they want to, but we felt as though it was necessary because we were getting so much friction about what our role was versus them, that we decided to do these classes every quarter for new. And sometimes we have to have people return and take the class again, but that was pre-pandemic, and I think we're going to start that up again in the fall. So again, measuring success, the maturity of your practice is another area where you can measure your success. This graphic is from S2E Consulting. I don't know if any of you know Wendy Kuhn, but this was something in her organization that we give credit to. We basically, in our charter updates, we basically add what we did or where we achieved different things on this continuum, what year. So this is 2019 and the beginning of 2020, where we made note of what we did and what we've achieved. There are certain things that we know we'll never get to, and never say never, but there's certain things on this side of the maturity of our practice that, like for the strategy area, even though we may participate in some discussions about strategy, and especially when a project is already thought of and established, the strategy office does not use our services the way we would like them to, but never say never. That's a goal, long term. But we're focusing more on this part of this diagram, the practice, progress, and the maturity of our practice. A lot of these areas over here we've already achieved, so not to say we're finished by any means, but we have progressed since we became more organized and more structured around our mission, our vision, our goals, and the practice structure. The other option is Business Architecture Guild also provides a maturity model that you can rate your practice or do a review of where your practice stands in terms of the guild. So I don't know if there's any questions, but that's the content that I have for you today. But some of the key points, again, the practice charter is not required, but it is it has been very helpful to our team, our organization, especially since we didn't have a clear direction or purpose. Your charter doesn't have to go anywhere. You can do the exercise of creating a charter just for your internal team. Or you may want to publish it for any of your stakeholders or any of your colleagues to review as needed. It really depends on your practice. I highly recommend using the value mapping and business model canvas. It does illuminate and give you some clarity on what your practice really is and what value it brings to your organization. And it actually focused us on who exactly are our customers. I mean, we always used to say the entire organization is our customer. but truly our customer is the CIO. Our customer is individual stakeholders submitting project requests. Our customer is our boss who needs us to be able to articulate the business's architecture in our tool so that he can get reports out. So that it really does illuminate a lot of what your practice is about and whether or not you're on the right track. And don't forget metrics. So that was, like I said, one of the hardest things for us to come up with. But again, through developing the charter, it became obvious that if we're going to achieve our mission, then we should be able to see that we're not having to change control, not having to spend millions of dollars redoing an initiative because the business's vision wasn't realized fully or understood fully by the IT team. And then review and refresh on a regular basis. And again, I'm not going to blame everything on the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, I was looking at and revising our charter every 6 months. So I think June of 2020 was the last time that I reviewed and revised. We just started revising for our version 7, maybe last month. So it's been a year since we reviewed it and revised it, and we have done some significant revisions in version 7. So that's all I have for you guys. Are there any questions, Beth, in the chat?
Yep. Someone submitted through the Q&A, and I do see that I can read it. So if you do have questions, you can submit through the chat. If you're shy, I think you can just send to the panelists so no one else sees. We'll keep you anonymous. The one in the Q&A says, is the practice charter developed with external stakeholders like other business areas within the company or just within your business architecture group?
So we did our first iteration within our group. So it was myself and the VP of our business solutions department. After we hired more people, it's between our team and then the VP reviews it, make sure that we're still aligned. We did try to ensure that our partner, since we have a outsourced platform vendor, we did share our charter early with that vendor. Did not turn out well because they took the content of our charter and turned it into their own practice. So we got no feedback from them. But the next thing we knew, within, I'd say 12 months, they stood up business architect and a business architecture practice. And we noticed that some of the same language that we use in our charter was being used by them. So we don't really share it outside of the group anymore. Or outside of the organization anymore, and definitely not with any vendors.
Interesting. I have a second question here. Do you have any person or group of people who, quote unquote, signs off on your charter or gives input to your charter?
Yes. And that is dovetailing into September's part 3, and that's the governance, business architecture practice governance. We do have a full governance model in place, and we do have teams that we interact with on a regular basis. Everybody in the division, there's a representative on the governance team, and any changes that we make, we put that before that body, and they review it. But I don't want to go into too much of the governance because that's the next part. But it does go through a governance review.
I still have a few more questions that are coming in, but yeah, we'll take this opportunity. On the screen. You see when part 3 is. I will say that now that my department, we're all busy taking vacations that we haven't been able to take, we're a little slow in getting this one up on the website. So I don't think we have it there for you to register for yet, but of course we will we'll get links and information sent to you as it becomes available, probably beginning of August. And this recording will not get posted until August. So if you want to circle back or want to send someone to watch this so they're ready for part 3, we're looking at August now with all of our schedules. Another question that's come in, more of a comment really, but Maureen probably want you to weigh in too. I really like the example of using change requests as a measure of success. I agree. I really like that as well. One of the things I think the practice struggles with is intangible value. That is, how does one quantify how much was saved by not making a bad decision or the wrong decision informed through the practice? This is a great way to somewhat show some of that. So Maureen, you guys have a secret formula for calculating, avoiding bad decision making?
No, but I'm not going to say unfortunately, but what we have seen is that there's business towers, if you will, leaders. They have in their minds that go in a certain direction and absolutely need to do this. And they even go out and sometimes, connect with vendors and they make all kinds of arrangements, and they're going down the path of signing agreements, and just it's not fully realized when they do this without any consultation that they're headed for a disaster, or they're headed for a lot more expenditure than they initially thought, or it's going to become an operational nightmare. I can give an example of an initiative that started in October of last year. The business leaders in our company that started this initiative or had the idea thought it would take, a few months. They wanted everything to be in place by the 1st of 2022. So we did our discovery and our assessment and produced our artifact. Again, it was another lengthy one. We tried to summarize it, but it just was so impactful and so much scope, and it hit every single area of the company just about. That leadership team came right out and said and I heard this through the grapevine because I'm not at the C-suite level, but I heard that they really did not, they appreciated our discovery and our documentation, and they made a comment that without it, they would have thought that they were going to be able to get this done within 12 months, which they absolutely could not have done. So it's through that type of feedback that we know we've averted a disaster. And at that level, at that C-suite level, the fact that they realized it was because of the discovery that we did, that's where, those are the real big wins in my mind, because hopefully they engage us sooner on most initiatives and take advantage of the discovery process.
And it sounds like you had mentioned adding a customer survey tool as a way to measure. And so maybe on that survey tool, one of your specific questions might be, did you dodge a bad decision? And, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And that might be a way to capture the wrong path not taken.
Yeah, or some questions like, did you change your approach after receiving the evaluation that we did or the discovery session, something like that?
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably going to be something that we'll have to ask on our survey.
All right. I'm doing a last call for questions and